We're all good. Got it. Okay. Hi, folks. Welcome back for our June session. We are going to be covering STAR technology tonight, and we've got a bit of everything to cover. I wanted to first ask everyone to please mute your mics, and as usual, just put your hand up if you have a question, and we'll try and get to you. Just know that I don't think I'm not monitoring the chat room, so Ian and vice versa, I'll try and look down, but if you see that we're not responding to your request or chat comment question, sorry, just put your hand up and let us know, okay? And with that, let's get it going. Okay, so Ian, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Yeah, with regards to the zero test, this is something that must be done. If you looked at the latest World Athletics newsletter, there was a world record that was applied for, and there was no zero control test, so it was rejected. And this is typically what happens also for, I believe, for national records as well. So it is important.
Down there, dear, you could say you own something, but you don't really.
Excuse me, Doug, can you mute your microphone, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. The photo finish, the chief photo finish judge initiates the test, and it's in cooperation with the referee and the chief starter. So the starter is the one that provides the gun and pulls the trigger for the test. And the transducer typically is about 30 centimeters from the gun. If you take a look at the time that takes for the sound to travel, 30 centimeters is 0.001 seconds, more or less. So if you look at the rule book, it kind of all fits together, because the result of the test has to show less than a 0.001 seconds time. Next, so the photo finish chief may ask a referee to witness, and the chief starter should inform track referee, start crew. There's be a technical delegate sometimes, competition director, meeting director. There's a whole slew of people that very frequently will want to witness the test, but certainly make sure that you've got the track referee or start referee involved. This is an example of a test. In this case, well, you need to have protection under the gun so that you do not damage the track. You place the gun so that the flash will be to the leading edge of the finish line. So the finish line typically, the finish line will be 5 centimeters wide. And if you notice on the track between lanes 4 and 5, there's a black mark, and that's most tracks should have that, and that's 2 centimeters wide, and that is where you have the flash show. The starter will pull the trigger, and the chief photo finish will get confirmation that the timing system is working properly. There's a whole multitude of guns. In this case, it was a 22, and the bright red flash across the start line sometimes you don't have the same amount of flash, and so if it's just smoke, sometimes it's a white piece of paper, and that goes across the leading edge of the finish line. If it's a electronic gun, it will be a light, and that will be on that. So in any case, you will have different scenarios for different guns. It's just to make sure that the flash or signal shows up on the line where it should. Okay.
Ian, I just want to intervene that if you go back, Lisa, if you go back to the next last slide, if you see on the right picture on your right, that means you were asking the starter or who's going to the starter who's will start the gun to not lead over the finish line, but be outside, because at this point, what I'm seeing in the picture, that means the head is over. That means we're not going to see the gun. That means you have to be away of the line. Make sure that there's nothing over that line, because usually in the international level, we have two cameras, both sides. That means if your head is blocking a view of something, that means we have to redo the test.
Yes, good point. That's exactly true. And many times we're asked to make sure that there isn't a shadow over the line, that kind of thing, so that and as I say, you're quite right on that.
Jill has a question. Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. Hi, Lisa and Ian. I would like to know, is it necessary to make the white sheet being signed by the start referee or the chief, the start referee or the chief starter? So sometimes I've been asked to sign the sheet and sometimes not. So what's the line? What we have to do?
Typically, I have been asked to take a look at take the white sheet and then put the date on it, put the name of the meat on it, and then sign my name make sure that as a referee that I sign it and identify my position at the meet. And some meets might even ask a starter or somebody else to sign it, like the chief photo finish as well. I think it depends on the meet, but certainly it's a good idea to have the sheet identified and signed.
So as much as we can. It's okay.
I just
Mhm.
want to emphasize at the international, that means we're using electronic gun. That means there's nothing on the paper. That means we don't need that sheet that you're starting on the track, because everything is computer on the finish line system. That means if you're using the electronic gun, you won't see a flame or something on the track. That means you only see a flash, and there's no mark on that piece of paper.
Yeah, they typically will use a little a black board, a plastic board, with the electronic pistol extended over the.
Took a picture of the bear downtown.
Hello. Hi.
Okay, and you too.
Okay, so typically when they're using the electronic pistol, the flash will actually be over the line itself. Whereas when we're using powdered pistols, that they're not touching the line, or they're close to the line, the leading edge of the line. When they're using the electronic pistols, they are actually over the line itself to catch the flash on the camera, which is different.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so start information systems. If you are familiar with the older rule books before 2017, the start information was actually called the false start control apparatus. And it was accepted, or it was deemed to be conclusive. So it didn't matter, the starter could not overrule. Since that time, from 2017 on, it is now deemed a resource. So it is a technical aid. It's not the be all end all of making a decision as to whether or not there's a false start. Next. There's a variety of different systems. Most of the time, I think you will see the Finish. Well, the Finish Links makes a start information system called React Links. In Europe, you see Timetronics more frequently, and then you have Seiko, Swiss Timing, and Omega, and they have all different, slightly different ways of measuring the pressure or acceleration of the box, as the case may be. And so there's advantages and disadvantages to all of these systems.
Okay.
In all cases, the reaction time as a Mac has to be 0.100 seconds or longer. So if it's less than 0.1 seconds, it's the system reacts or shows a false start. There will be an acoustic sound heard by a starter wearing headphones, or an automatic recall. And sometimes there's an extra headset that's available that can be worn by another person who will also hear the beep. Yeah,
and with regards to the automatic recall system, we used during the Pan American Games the automatic acoustic recall system. I think Finish Links was the provider. And the issue with the recall system in a stadium, especially when it's quite loud, is that the athletes aren't able to hear it. So a lot of times what we were asked to do was provide a real pistol and ask people to use their pistols to recall the races as well. When there's a lot of sound in the stadium, it becomes pretty problematic. And we did have a case in Toronto at the Pan Ams where the recaller didn't see the false start on one side. The starter did, but the starter only had an electronic pistol, and the acoustic sound went off, but the athletes didn't stop. So I think it was the men's 110-meter hurdles we had to rerun at a later time because most of the athletes had already run the entire race. So it's important to, I can tell you, I understand completely why the folks in the UK and in Europe will use two pistols. They'll have one in their hand and one as a recall. Makes good sense. It's just something that we don't do here in North America, and we may have to start doing it at some point. But anyway, that's just an aside.
Okay, there's this is an example. This is shows there's a printout. Typically, you see a listing of the times, and then available to you, depending on the system, you will have a variety of different types of waveforms. And so you'll be able to take a look at the waveforms for all the lanes. And beyond that, well, if we go to the next slide, oh, yeah, there we go. You've got the waveform of all lanes on the left, and on the right, you've got an expanded waveform. And generally speaking, it's pretty important to take a look at that expanded waveform, not only of the lane in question, but sometimes if you've got movement in adjacent lanes, you know, if this was lane 5, well, then take a look at lanes 4 and 6 for potential movement. And there'll be examples of what that can look like later. This is an example of Seiko, their system, and on the left, on lane 8, you can see that the time was not legal, and then of course on the left, pardon me, on the right, sorry, on the right on lane 6, you can see, and there's the red flag, and definitely somebody has left early.
Next.
Okay, this is Amiga, and you have, each lane has its own waveform, and you can see they're all good. None of them show up as a red flag, and all the times are listed there.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So as Ian has gone through the various systems, I'm going to take you through some of the issues you may encounter using the systems and what may trigger the false start detection system, or the SIS, and what sort of pitfalls you may also encounter in using them. So some of the influences that may cause issues for the acceleration system, so this will be for the finished links or the other track motion SIS system, is trembling. So trembling when an athlete comes to their set position, or an athlete who has some strong twitching motion on set. With the acceleration system, there have been situations or have been instances where non-static surface, so a surface that was in motion, an indoor track possibly, or where you had shot put, if you had a board track or a track that wasn't suspended quite right, every slight sound or slight impact will cause some sort of vibration, which is actually picked up by the system itself, by the acceleration system. Volume, loudspeakers, especially depending upon where they're situated near the athletes, If you've got a large PA system and you happen to have a base that travels, it actually can impact and trigger the false start detection system or the SIS system. With regards to the pressure and force, while it's possible that there is some movement before the gun that the system can detect, it actually does a good job in discerning when that movement actually occurs. And you'll see later on when we're looking at some other slides, you can see where athletes are trembling. You can see where the athlete may have had has started pushing on the blocks and then release their feet or lessen the force on the blocks. And it actually, you can actually see it on the waveform, which all helps when it comes to determining whether or not there is a false start or a false start was generated. Okay, so what you're looking at, this is the Omega system. So this is a pressure force. So this is where a regular start, but you'll see a lot of trembling going on, and you'll see that over here leading up on example A, where the athlete isn't quite steady in the blocks. They're trembling the entire time. They do hold, and then as soon as they release, they're off. As soon as the gun goes, they're off. And it's usually, excuse me, the trembling is a fast repetitive movement, that causes the amplitude. And in this case, it's newtons. But the trembling will never trigger the reaction time measurement. Okay. And the same on the other, on the example B, where you can see the athletes was trembling before the report of the gun, and then they loosen up, or excuse me, the pressure is relieved, and then they start pushing on the blocks again. Okay. So the next one is, so this is a regular start where with weakening force before leaving. So some athletes, they tend to weaken their force, and you'll usually see this before they leave, where their hips will drop. And there's a slight dip in the pressure on the blocks. And then when they start applying the pressure again, the force, the waveform will go right back up. And it's usually, this is very typical with a lot of athletes. And usually when that happens, you'll notice that the athletes will get a quite quick reaction time to the sound of the gun. And in both cases, they're similar waveforms. So twitching is a single movement which occurs during the set position. So it's the force curve that's seen, and it's usually a single peak. And where you see the two peaks, it's the dominant leg or the dominant foot leaving, and then the other foot pushing off before the athlete actually leaves the blocks. So this movement that you'll see, which is the twitching movement, is not a false start. For the pressure sensitive blocks, the twitching is normally filtered by the starting blocks, and it doesn't trigger the reaction time. However, if the twitching does occur and the starter thinks that it's an excessive amount of twitching, or that it could potentially trigger another athlete, it's at the starter's discretion to call back the athletes and potentially warn them, and that would be between the starter and the start referee. Okay, any questions thus far?
Yeah, I guess the comment on that is, if there is a twitch and it affects, that movement affects another athlete, then that can certainly be, in many cases, considered improper conduct. And that's where the start referee could issue a yellow warning card.
If it happens to impact another athlete and another athlete out, then yeah, that would be the case. Okay. Okay, so here are some examples. Yes, my twitching finger. Here are some examples of some twitching movement. for an athlete. I'm not able to see down below. Does everyone see a bar across the bottom of the screen?
No.
No, I'm hindered. I can't see the bottom part, but I'll take you through C and D, but I can't see below. For some reason, I'm obstructed. So again, you're looking at tremors or trembling movement in the blocks, and you can see in item C or image C where the athlete just after the report of the gun, the pressure spikes and then it drops, and then they leave the blocks. Again, it can be a leg, it can be just settling back into the blocks. Over in image E, again, these are pressure force waveforms. You have the athlete who was trembling, and they've trembled quite a bit, and the pressure on the blocks started going up, and immediately at the sound of the gun, it dropped off again. So they're not leaving the blocks. They're still applying pressure, but they backed off on the amount of pressure they were applying, and then left the blocks. And they left the blocks within. It was very close for number 2, but they managed to leave in good time. Okay, the other 2, I apologize, I can't see. So
If you actually, you can see the last 2. Just a comment on that. The many times you will see that initial twitch, and they will be then rocked back, and this, in some cases, the reaction time can be very slow, and but that it is still would be considered a fair start. And then the on that slide on the bottom right, it shows a negative reaction time, and that is where the twitch has triggered the system, but that would not be normally considered a false start, because the main force coming out of the blocks is well after that, well after the 0.1 seconds.
I think that one may have been a false start. I just can't see it, Ian, so I apologize, guys. I have a bar going right across where the waveform is, so.
Okay, yeah. As I say, I would think that's not a false start. That was a twitch that triggered the start information system. It would have to be recalled. You would look at that, and in most cases, it would probably be a twitch, and they actually left the blocks sometime closer to like 0.15 seconds or so, and not a very good start.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ian. Okay. So one of the things that there have been some developments in the technology that's been available to starters. So internationally, in addition to having access to video referee data, which we do use while we're on the track, we also were able to make use of a new system by Seiko. So they have a video terminal, which actually sits right on the track next to the starter. And there are 2 cameras. So the first one is down the track here in the first bubble, and it provides a feed, which is a frontal view of the athletes and their starting blocks. And then there's another one, excuse me, the second bubble, which is outside of the track, up in the stadium, in this case, in an indoor facility. And it provides a rare view of the athletes with a view of their feet. And it actually is displayed on the terminal as well. So it's a split screen, top and bottom. And then along the side, which I'll show you in a second, there is actually the waveform. So you have all of this information right at your fingertips. and it's right there on the track. So this is what it looks like. This is just an example of what it looks like. And I'm just going to show, if the video moves, this is what you end up seeing on the track. So in this instance, the angle that you're seeing is quite good. So you can pretty much see most of the athlete's feet, whether or not they're in contact. And with the front camera, you can pretty much see whether or not the athletes have lost contact, their hands have lost contact with the track. The issue with the indoor setup in this instance, at the last World Championships, was that the camera that had the rear view didn't have enough height clearance. So there were some issues with seeing the athlete's feet, whether or not they were losing contact with the blocks, which did pose a couple of problems during the event. And okay, so what we wanted to do is take you through a couple of scenarios just to show you what the technology is that we're making use of as starters and what you guys are making use of, but sort of to bring it all back home with positioning of the start team, the angles that we're covering, the technology that's available to the starters, and basically your decision making and what it boils down to. So this setup is at an indoor competition at the World Championships, actually in Birmingham. This is where the starter was positioned along the track. So the starter was quite a distance from the start line. The recall 1 was out in front. So the lines where the numbers are is exactly where the athletes were lined up in their blocks. Recall 1 was out front, just shy out front, but again, back with the starter. Recall 2 was on the other side of the track in line with the starter, who's on the other side. Recall 3 was in the back of the track, again, up on a bank, watching the athletes. Okay, I'm going to have to bear with me for a sec because I have to back out of this to find the you share. Okay. Hey, Serge.
Yes.
How do I find, I had the videos queued up, but I don't see them.
You have to get out.
Get out of the share.
No.
Oh, here. Okay, there's one. Okay, so that's the sorry, folks. Okay, here we go. So this is the, can everyone, can you see this, Serge?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the setup I just described, and just watch what happens at the start. Okay. So this is the waveform that was provided to us. Hope everyone can see it. There we go. So lane 6 had come out, lane 4 had come out, and lane 3 they all false started. The issue here was the starter couldn't see any of these athletes because the starter was right along in line with all of the athletes. So there was no indication for the starter that the athlete, that there was an issue in lane. It was in lane 3 and 4. The start referee, the recall starter went over to the starter to indicate that there was an athlete who'd moved in lane 3, I do believe, in lane 3. And the starter had to decide whether or not they were going to charge lane 6 or lane 3 and 4. And in the end, what happened was the starter ended up asking the referee to give lane 3 a yellow card or warning, because the recall starter had communicated to the starter that there was some movement, although the starter was completely blind in seeing the race. So in this instance, the information was there. The videos were there that showed that the athlete broke. The recall, or excuse me, the printouts were clear that the athletes, I'll go back to that, were clear that the athlete, that there was some movement back in lane 3. There was some movement going on back in here. But it wasn't, at the time, the information that the starter had, this was the decision they ended up making. Was it correct? It was, they were making use of all of the information they had access to. And that ended up being their decision.
Lisa, could you show up the video again, please?
Yep. Video. So there was movement in lane 4 and lane 3 broke, and then, but lane 7 also came out, or 6, sorry, came out.
5.
5, no, lane 6.
Oh, okay, yeah, and 6.
Yeah. So in that case, there was a lot of information, but in this case, there wasn't very good coverage by the start team to allow the starter to see what they clearly needed to see. And in this case, the starter could only see the athletes stacked up on top of one another, sort of in a row, which is pretty problematic. And in this case, it proved to be pretty problematic, even with the information that they had access to. So,
John Stevenson, could you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Thanks. Hi, Lisa. It's John.
hi.
Thanks for playing the video again. When and hindsight's always 20/20. So looking specifically at lanes 3 and 4, I was looking again at the waveforms. It appears to the naked eye that it's lane 4, the Turkish athlete, that is twitching and actually starts a forward motion, but catches himself, that I think triggers 3, and then that might have caused 6 to go. But just looking at the video, and I throw that out to everybody to discuss, it appears that 4 is moving or twitching, and that triggered lane 3. And all your points are absolutely right, Lisa, where the starter's out of really commission to talk specifically, but what's everybody else think? Like how that was unfolded? My question for a discussion.
Does anyone have any comments to add to John's comment? Again, we're not looking at the chat, so if people have a question or want to comment, can you please raise your hand? No comments? Oh, Doug?
I agree. Like just looking at how the starter and recall starters were set up, they were definitely out of position for the most part, and it's definitely not how I would have set them up or would like to see them set up. And definitely lane 4 causes in my opinion, causes a false start, causes lane 3 to go just by his movement.
Okay.
Rick Grady, could you comment it?
Any
Hi
other-
there. No, it appeared to me that lane 3 actually dropped initially, and it looked just dropping right there, just prior to lane 4 starting his movement. A little bit of a drop there with the arms and the hips.
Yeah, again, it's John. And if we layered in the waveform, I'm not sure I'm reading it correctly, because as I say, to the naked eye, it looks like 4 has initiated some forward motion, but catches himself, which I, again, think triggers 3. And, but looking at the waveform, it looks like 4 is behind 3 coming out of the blocks, but it doesn't even show any sort of pressure on the foot plates or anything to.
So what you're looking at is lane 4. Lane 4 moved. Lane 4 did have movement. So lane 4 was eventually given a yellow card. Lane 3 came out, which was accurate. But if you look at the waveform right in here, these aren't amplified. So what you're looking at is there's some subtle movement here with lane 4. But the bigger issue is what to have done with lane 6. And without this information readily available, with only printouts, it's very, very hard to try and come to a decision, again, within a few minutes or a few seconds. So lane 4 was given a yellow card, but the bigger issue was lane 6. So ideally, lane 6 should have been false started. So the scenario or the sequence should have been, or could have been, sorry. Lane 4 was DQ'd and lane 3 was a yellow card. Or sorry, lane 4 was the yellow card. And for everyone's information, the setup on the track here, there's no option to choose a different location. This was the option that the starters were to set up in, like the start team. There was no other option for them. So just know that sometimes you may be in situations where you don't have an opportunity to choose where you go, and you have to make the best of it. And that's what ended up happening in this situation, an unfortunate situation.
Lisa, you mentioned one of the recallers came forward. Do you know which one that was? 1, 2, or 3?
It was recall 1.
So do you think, and could you as the starter, when you're given that kind of direction, don't you think also if the starter and R1 change positions, that might arm the starter with a better perspective? The
starter is tied to the electronic gun. This is the range of the starter. The recaller had a pistol, and all of the other recallers had pistols with them. The starter was the only one with an electronic pistol. So, okay.
Sorry, not to flog a dead horse. Can we see the video one more time, please?
Actually, I will do it one more time. We have to go on because we have 2 more scenarios real quick to finish up. So, just give me one.
And just as a comment, if you were to discount lane 4, lane 6 was first out, lane 3 was second out, and there was 2 close that one could not have pulled the other because there were considerably, it was less than a 1/10 of a second.
Actually, John, I cannot find it. I apologize. I'm going to have to leave it, John.
Okay.
My technological abilities are limited.
All right.
All right.
It would've been nice.
If I can find it at the end, I will pull it back up. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's move on really quickly. So this scenario, we had already talked about previously. Play from, of course, play from here. We had already talked about this scenario. This was the Olympics 200-meter men's heat 1, where the athlete does not lose contact, but is called back. So I wanted to show you the video for this again and explain just a couple of other things. So we're going to go out here, click on here.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you guys remember that video? Most of you? We would have seen that video. It's lane 7 here, and he makes a movement. So the issue with this one, or the thing that you should be aware of, is there was no false start reading. So there was no printout for that start because the athlete didn't lose contact with the blocks, and their hands didn't lose contact with the track. It was a visual recall. So the recallers with the pistols called back the race, and they automatically charged the athlete from the setup, which you can see right here. All of the recallers are back here. So there were no recallers along the outside of the track here, and there was certainly no recallers up top to actually see where whether or not the athlete had lost contact with the track. So I think I mentioned to you guys that what happened was the start referee reinstated the athlete, and they were allowed to run in a subsequent heat. Okay. So again, another situation where you have video, you have your false start detection system or SIS system. And in this case, there was no readout, but yet there was a false start charge, which you can and should be able to do for rolling starts and other starts of that nature. If you do see something, then yes, you're obliged to recall the race. Okay, and then the last one I wanted to take you guys through was a race that was at the World Indoor Championships. So this race was, show current slide. Okay, I hope everyone can see it. So there was a false start. So the false start detection system went off on its own. So the system automatically recalled. We reviewed, and this one I say we because I was there. The video and the waveform data was displayed on that terminal that I'd displayed for you guys or provided you a sample of. And the start information system, the information that was provided to us. So this waveform and all of the videos were inconclusive. There was no visual on the athlete losing contact with the blocks. If you look at the waveform here, everyone can see this. Right when the gun is activated or when the gun is armed and it goes off, you see the athlete loses, starts applying pressure and then immediately drops off pressure from the blocks and then starts out. Okay, so it's this movement in here, oops, sorry. It's that movement in here which triggers the false start detection system or the SIS system, sorry. Okay, I'll hold that thought and I'm going to show you the video, which is the video that was provided by the local host feed cameras to the referee. Okay, so you're watching lane 3 and you're watching their feet.
Thank you.
happened?
Thank you.
Did you guys watch that again? Watch his feet.
Thank you. Didn't you?
Oh. Did anyone see his feet leave the blocks?
No.
Yep. No, not leave the blocks. He just contracted and caught himself.
Yes. Does anyone see that he left the blocks? Because that's what the SIS demonstrates, is that he broke contact with blocks. And in fact, he did not. He did trigger. And again, this is something you guys are going to have to be aware of when you're using the SIS systems, is that you have to make sure that you have some confirmation, whether it's video. You have to take a real hard look at the SIS data to make sure that you are seeing, you have to understand what you're seeing, what the waveform is just demonstrating to you. And in this case, the waveform is demonstrating that the athlete lightened his pressure, and then he put forth and he applied more pressure and then let up. So he peaks, he applies pressure, he peaks, but he never, he never breaks contact with the block. And then the gun goes off. Questions?
And I guess just to reiterate, in most systems, I believe these individual lanes can be expanded further.
Mm-hmm. I can. No questions? Okay. So when we get down finally to decision making, and the SIS are useful for providing reaction times for the athletes in all lanes. And as Ian just mentioned, that you can actually isolate. Finish Links has a way of isolating each of the lanes, so you can actually see the acceleration on the blocks, in this case for Finish Links, which is a totally different measurement than the Seiko and Omega systems, which is a pressure-based system. So if you're going to be using Finish Links, you need to know the difference between each of the systems and what you're looking at. Okay, so if a false start is picked up by an SIS, but not noticed by the starter or a recaller, it's important for you guys as a group collectively to be sure that you have information that reinforces your decision. Okay, sometimes just having a reaction time isn't sufficient, especially if you cannot prove if an athlete has lost contact with the track or with the blocks. Okay, and lastly, look for the visual cues. You want to consult with the SIS, and you want to make sure that you're understanding what you're looking at, the readings. You want to consult with all of your recallers, and you want to talk to the video referee if you have access to videos of any sort. Okay. I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Lisa, I just wanted to comment that scenarios 2 and 3 reinforce the fact that the positioning is very important. And on shoot starts, it's very important that you have a recaller in behind the athletes, because when athletes start, the first motion is always from the rear foot. They push off the back leg first. So you'll see that twitch, and you'll see if it leaves the track. And with the echelon starts, the positioning on those was really questionable, right? Maybe there was something in the field that interfered with how they should position themselves, but there should always be a recaller at seeing a side view at right angles to most of the athletes.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, if you're without a camera, or if you're without an SIS system, then my suggestion would be to use as many eyes as you have on every athlete. So my rule of thumb is to always have 2 pairs of eyes, no matter how you go about doing it, but have 2 sets of eyes on an athlete. at any given time from different perspectives. That's very, very important, from different perspectives. Otherwise, you might as well, just have a starter by themselves if everyone's going to be, if everyone's going to have the same perspective of the athlete. So if you can get a profile view, get a profile view, but you're not just looking at you're not just looking at them for rolling starts. You need to focus in on their feet and their hands, which is specifically what the rule indicates. And you have to be able to isolate those during a false start. Okay. Questions, comments? Someone had asked if we had a picture of an electronic gun, and I do, if folks are interested in staying and letting me find it. So this is going to be it for the summer for us, and we'll be back in the fall if folks really are interested in continuing with it. And we can figure out what other topics to focus in on from your suggestions for next year, or if you guys wanted to go over something else, just let us know. But with that, if you guys don't have any questions, then we'll sign off. I'm just going to go and grab a picture of an electronic gun start. If